Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. My name is Douglas Gabriel. I'm here with my good friend John Barnwell and Michael McKibben. We are discussing the future of all this technology. I don't know, I call it the digital future, the virtual reality future. And I'm going to frame this for you gentlemen, and I'm going to let you just go at this. And this is sheer speculation. So Michael, the engineer, please, you take off your engineer hat, you just whole hog. Go into that very moral Christian part of yourself when you talk about this, because I mentioned it to you and you didn't say you were really keen about it, but I got to talk about this. First off, let me give you an example. Sophia the robot. Okay, so she becomes a citizen of Saudi Arabia, even though the females in Saudi Arabia aren't citizens of Saudi Arabia. So we give more credence to a computer. If there's an IT problem, no one gets in trouble. All you have to say is IT problem, tech problem.
My first reaction to that was, what's the ulterior motive? Because everything about that fired off every cognitive dissonance I had. So what in the heck was that?
Well, the computers rule. How dare
Arabia,
you as a human?
Of all places to have a platform for that, out of Saudi Arabia?
Isn't that disgusting? And my point is they use the name Sophia.
I don't have anything against Saudi Arabia, but their names never come up in the tech world. And all of a sudden, they're introducing a robot.
And Sophia is the being of wisdom, but she's not wise, and she's not artificial intelligence, and she's not intelligent at all. She's a machine, and she's a machine subroutines. My point is, in the future, are we going to put chips in our brain? Are we going to become cyborgs? Are we going to try to manipulate the human being until it becomes more of a machine than a human? Some say that our future is nothing more than being imprisoned by the machines that we're creating now. Look at the predictions of the scientists. They now say 80% of the workers will be out of work in just a few years by robots. We have robot warriors. We got robot sex. We got robot prostitutes. We got drones delivering things to your house. We have the Internet of Things. You shouldn't have to leave your house in the future because Eric Schmidt's box of Alphabet is going to bring you everything you need. Are we going to become machines? Who is going to win this? The science fiction says humans lose to the robot wars, to the cyborg wars, to the clone wars. Are we going to lose this? Are we going to win this?
Well,
where's the hope?
One of the things about working with technologists and mathematicians and physicists and mechanical engineers is the nature of the people that tend to go into these fields. Over time, you see patterns. And one of the patterns is people who like doing that, and it's a predominance of men, but there are women also, is that they like interesting projects. And one of the things I observed long ago is they really don't care whether the end result is moral or not. They don't really care what the negative implications of what they're doing is. They just like doing it because it's interesting. And what we've done now is we have given those folks a lot of cash. And so the natural end result of that progression is we're going to keep giving them cash to do interesting things, which what you're describing is the natural end result of continually funding technology scientists to do interesting things. They're going to do a lot of interesting things that are going to hurt us.
Boys' toys.
Yeah, boys and girls' toys. Mm-hmm. And so over time, it seems that if we don't put a fence around this progress, we will end up in this dystopian future you're describing. But I don't think that's inevitable. I think we have choices. We're moral beings. We have choices to make. And the choices we make right now may or may not prevent the future of humanity from going off the rails.
Well, I'm not sure which way it's going to go, but I do know one thing. No machine will ever have any intelligence, and no machine will ever have any wisdom. And that's the reason that they caricaturize it. That's the reason that they make it entertainment. That's the reason education's been replaced by entertainment. That's the reason religion has been replaced by consumerism. That's the reason that your cell phone is more important to the people at your Thanksgiving dinner. Your cell phone is more important than anything. Take away someone's cell phone and throw it in the pond. See what happens. Take away their computer. Tell them there's no Wi-Fi connection. To them, to a teenager, no Wi-Fi connection is worse than a nuclear war. Tell them, which would you rather have? A nuclear bomb drop on your head or no Wi-Fi? And they'll say, give me the nuclear bomb.
Well, you made a statement earlier about how the Saudis haven't apparently played much of a role in technology, but yet they're kind of like a power behind the throne. So, for example, if you look at the prince that was arrested, Al-Walid bin Talal, for example. Okay, well, he's a major shareholder in most of the social media companies.
Yeah, that's what I'm coming to be aware of.
He's a major shareholder of Citigroup. Now, it's common knowledge amongst people that are paying attention that Citigroup had selected Barack Obama's cabinet members before he even took office.
Citigroup, as I recall, after Glass-Steagall was abolished, the first act was to combine the city properties into Citigroup. That was created by Bill Clinton and Larry Summers in 1999, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
that was the first of the big conglomerate banks.
The fact that it was bin Talal that is a major shareholder in that, and also occupied the upper floors of the Mandalay Bay Hotel as a major shareholder in MGM, and was arrested after Donald Trump had his interesting first, mind you, the first thing that Donald Trump did when he became President Trump, the first trip that he took was to Saudi Arabia, okay? And he had that meeting where they all had their hands on that glowing ball, right? And they did the sword dance and the whole deal.
And that was called the Palantir Ball.
Yeah, the Palantir Ball, exactly. And that was, if you look in the film, you can see up in the center that it's at the Anti-Terrorism Center of Saudi Arabia, okay? So that it was the Crown Prince coming into power and accepting the challenge from Donald Trump that they were to disavow all forms of terrorism. And so if you go into the Q clearance posts that have been happening on the internet that have been getting so much traffic, you'll see that the plus that Q clearance posted, okay, and 7 hours later, or 7 minutes later, President Trump made a post on Twitter with the plus. Now later, Q clearance clarifies that plus, okay, is the Saudis. Plus is the Rockefellers, and plus is George Soros. So you're talking about who's the money behind this globalist alliance between the institutional left and the extreme elements that are present in Islam. And that's what we're looking at here. And that's the challenge that Donald Trump has taken, and he met it head on. It surprised everybody. He went straight to Saudi Arabia, and they thought, oh, geez, what's he doing? Well, he's had to resort.
So are you saying that programmers from Saudi Arabia are involved, or you're talking about the money?
Just the money.
Oh, okay. Because we haven't noticed much presence of Saudi programmers.
They figure if they own things, they don't have to. Okay. Mind you, if you check the early history of the Saudis, that leads back to raiders that raided the caravans. They ultimately capitalized on the efforts of other people. They were big in the slave trade. I mean, I don't want to throw shade on them, but that's their history, and it's really quite well known and well written about.
Right.
So is the petrodollar becoming the digital dollar? Have the tech monopoly cyber lords actually replaced the Saudi influence in America? Because it was the petrodollar, and OPEC has controlled our economy, and now it's the bubble on the stock market is being watched through Apple, and so it's the few big monopolies that are in fact driving our economy? And is that going to drive us into abnegating humanity, abnegating humanness for machines? That's the question for me, because what you did with social networking gave globalism and global communication and global commerce the possibility to exist. It's going so fast. You sit here in front of me and you tell me about your experiences, and this was not that long ago that the revolution that we've experienced, this quantum leap in computing, could in fact absorb and basically consume those who are unconscious.
Well,
of its effects.
as we have observed from looking at all the Eclipse Foundation minutes, they got started on November 29th of 2001, thinking we were ready. We didn't get everything debugged with the scalability issues until the end of 2003. Then once Zuckerberg and everybody else got the code, they were off to the races by February 2nd through the 5th of 2004, when EclipseCon, when IBM hosted their first convention out in San Francisco, in the middle of which Facebook launched. And then you look at the continuing development of the code. They didn't really start hitting their stride until Barack Obama took power. Mm-hmm. And so it was you can see the whole nature of everybody who was anybody in tech had joined Eclipse by 2007, 2008. They had almost 200 members. They actually boasted it with logos of all their members on their website.
And look at the exponential growth of every one of those companies. So
Right.
Stretch that out for 10 years. Stretch that
Right.
out to 15 years. Where are we going to be? Will we have any more human freedom, or will machines basically control our lives?
Well, what I wanted to say about the Eclipse piece is that we also now see from banking records that a lot of money started being invested from Russia, from Dubai, and various locations in the Middle East about that time into these companies. And then they, I think Facebook probably delayed because of our lawsuit until 2012, when we were turned down at the Federal Circuit. But we could already see them announcing all their inter-alliances and things that are so anti-competitive, you can't even believe it. So by the time Barack Obama's finishing up his first term, they were off to the races.
Is it Disney who has his brain in solution? And there's also people who are cryogenetically frozen. Michael, when you die, you're a great genius. Should we put your brain into a machine? Can we download you into a computer? John, I think that a cyber upgrade for you could be helpful. That hand
Well,
of
actually,
yours.
I've already stored myself on this empty card.
I just saw that Star Trek, one of those Star Trek episodes the other day where he dumped it. He was going to die, so he dumped it into the next generation.
They think they can do this. I know it sounds like I'm making a joke.
Well,
They are spending billions of dollars to try to put their consciousness into a machine. And these are the psychopaths at the top, who are these cutout cardboard, what are they called? Young boy kings. These boy kings think they're going to live forever, even if it's in a machine.
It reminds me of what Rudolf Steiner had said about psychology. He said that how can one create a human psychology, when you don't even know what a human being is? See, and so consequently, you have this kind of counter image of a human being that they're working with, and they think, aha, we've figured it out. And all it is kind of a counter image of the human nervous system. Okay? The center of human consciousness is not the nervous system. That's the mirror, the reflective mirror. The center of human consciousness is in the heart. Mm-hmm. See? And there is no heart in this system. It's heartless. And that gets back to what I was saying in a previous episode, is that you have these archon beings that are binary. They have no center force like a heart. But the heart is an image of the cosmos, really. And it's an image of the cosmos, whereas the nervous system is a reflection of the cosmos, you see. so that you have this counterplay. If you go into embryology, you'll see that the first things that arise, right, it's blood and nerve. And out of blood and nerve, out of the white and the red, it's the white and red of alchemy, right, or the yin-yang, right? Out of this white and red arises a human being, see? But the living element is expressing in the blood. See, the nervous system can work because it's a deadening force, that thoughts die into your nervous system. Nervous tissue's kind of the most inert, and because it's so it participates in the world of death, it can enable the transmission of impulses to carry through undisturbed, whereas the blood is much too turbulent as it spirals through the blood vessels and so on and so forth, you see. So that in understanding what a human being is, it's not encompassed in a computer. A computer is not an image of a human being, see? And that is the problem. And that's what's going to bring us into the new realm, dispensation, what have you. It will be the ability to be able to translate what we have within the world of subnature techniques and humanize it sufficiently so that it's directed through heart forces. Okay, and Rudolf Steiner described technology in the future that was dependent upon the moral force of the individual, so that if one was not possessed of those moral forces, you couldn't even make the machine operate. Now that's kind of hard to conceive of, but yet if one carries that image as something of a goal, at least one could strive to embrace what it means to be human has to do with something moral, see? And that's what was so struggled with. If you look in the example of the church fathers, you have the Greek church fathers that were philosophers, but then you have the fathers of the Roman church, of the Western church, well, they were lawyers, see? And that's kind of like, again, the blood and nerve. The Eastern church is the blood and the Western church is the nerve. So now we have a Congress and a Senate, and who are they? It's a bunch of lawyers. And they're gonna parse everything down into legalese. They're gonna capture creativity. Why? Name somebody on Capitol Hill that's ever created anything. But the only one who's ever created anything is President Trump, right? He's one of the few people in that whole city that's ever created anything.
Well, I think the way I look at him is he's not out to create a permanent job for himself in Washington.
Yeah, it's not a career path.
He just wants to. I've often said the best thing we could do is take all of our agencies and spread them out all over the United States. And I actually heard this idea from a Democratic funder in Minnesota, so I don't take credit for it. But he said we've got to break what he called the Acela Mafia, which is the Acela train from Washington all the way up to Boston. And basically that's where the power center is right now. And he said, move these agencies out to North Platte, Nebraska. Because as soon as you do that, you break up this cabal they sit around in Washington and they conceive of these legalistic notions that you're talking about, and they agree that they're the right thing to do, and then they act on them and they find money for them. But if they're all out and about around in the midst of real people, it seems to me you're going to start seeing a change in the way
there could be. See, the thing is, for example, if you look at the media, in 1980, there were more than 50 media companies that were considered the major media. Now there's what, 6?
6, yes.
Okay. And also in 1980...
all owned by the same group of banks, by the way.
Yeah, the same 6. And
then their underlying funds are all the same.
Yeah,
folks.
yeah. It's all... There's 147 corporations that earn 80% of the wealth in the world. That was what they came up in the Swiss computer analysis of 40 some thousand corporations. But anyways, to get back to the theme that I'm expressing here, if you also go back to 1980, you'll find that Washington, D.C. at that time was basically a middle-class city.
Even as late as 1980.
Well, coming out of the late 70s into 1980, that's when it started. It's blooming, what have you, as a result of, because we don't have a sufficient short terms of political offices, and we have all the lobbyists in place and all of that. Now it's one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Now, why is Barack Obama wealthy when he makes what he's supposed to be making? He's been making presidential income, why is Nancy Pelosi worth what? I think it's $40 million being a public servant. They're all doing all inside.
When they get elected, they become investing geniuses.
Yeah.
Oh, genius. No insider trading there.
That's obvious.
But you see, once you centralize everything in Washington, D.C., that's what computers do. Computers centralize.
Yes.
And here's the deal. I never trusted those, though I had one of the first degrees in computer programming. They are black boxes filled with gremlins and demons who suck the warmth out of your body and suck the light out of your brain. And that's the way
That's
I've
what
always
my grandma
looked at it.
thought.
I'm sorry to have to tell you. I know that this is your business and all, but my question is when your work, because this has been proven.
Basically, computers suck.
They suck. They suck the warmth and the life right out
Well,
of you.
let me back
turn
up.
it to something moral?
Let me
Can
back
we?
you up. The computers, when they are replacing a repetitive task to free up somebody else so they don't get carpal tunnel syndrome or something like that, I don't see how anybody could say that's bad.
No, I agree.
Okay,
it saves work.
Mechanistic, replacing mechanistic tasks that are dehumanizing, it seems to me, is a useful use of a piece of technology.
Schmidt trying to call me.
Oh, okay.
But
right?
The,
Would
but
you
the
agree
Atlas
with that?
Warrior computer.
Well, that's a little bit different story. So any of these things can be used for good or evil, and we want to talk about using them for good.
That's the whole point. How can we bring warmth back? For instance, when you're on Facebook, there's a list of diseases that arise from being on Facebook, and one of them is that you're cold and heartless because you're not really ever going to meet those people, so you can say whatever you want, so people are as cruel as they've ever been. They admit they, in some cases, never been more cruel than the words they use on Facebook to these people they'll never meet, though they're their friends who give them dopamine hits every time they like something that they post. So this is the devil trying to suck you in, and the demons trying to control your life, suck up your willpower. Now, you can debate this any way you want. I'm looking at it very simplistically as a religious person. Machines can relieve a lot of work, but do we want them to relieve all of our work so that we have nothing to do, so that we
Obviously not.
we sit around and what becomes of us then? What is a human being, as John has asked? Are we a human becoming an angel, or are we a human devolving into an animal, or are we a human turning into a machine, or are we a machine that did a machine create us?
This is a spiritual war of individuals empowered with different philosophies that they're trying to push on the public. And that's the problem. The genius of the Republic is they created a mechanism for dialogue. We're not using that mechanism. I don't have to agree with you. You don't have to agree with me. But we need the dialogue. And the danger is you get all the money. I have none of the money, and you push your philosophy on me without my permission. That's where it goes off the rails. And what you're saying is, through this various mechanisms of money, people with certain philosophies of life, which you've said, John, are two-dimensional, not three-dimensional, as is a moral nature, I got that, are now have a lot of the financial power to push their philosophy of life on the rest of us. And that's what we've got to stop.
Absolutely. See, the thing is, if you go back to John Stuart Mill, he was the one.
I didn't go back to him. I've never been to him. Who is he?
Okay,
John takes us on astral trips into the past all the time. You have to be ready to take a trip in time.
If you don't mind me asking.
If you want a tree that reaches to the heavens, it has to have roots deep into the earth. See, so if you really want to approach an idea, if you know the history of the idea, See,
Mm-hmm.
you can express it in a way that is resonant to a much greater extent. The modern individual is ahistoric.
Right.
They're like a goldfish.
Right.
As soon as they get to the other side of the bowl, then they come back and you're a brand new experience.
Right.
See? And that's what Facebook's basically is, a goldfish bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go back to John Stuart Mill,
When was he?
well, that's not important.
Well, I know, but I like to get a grounding.
19th century.
19th century. Okay.
Yeah. The important point is the value of the ability to be wrong. You see, that the whole scientific method is based upon perception of error, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you pursue a subject, and you try to find the flaws in your theory, and you keep refining your theory. That's
Right.
what you do. And what's happening now in culture, you see this whole thing about your social justice warriors and all of that madness out there. What's this? You can't say this word. You can't say. They're trying to hem you in. But see, the impetus behind this is these non-creative people. They want to simplify their task of control, see? Because they go, okay, well, now that we've done this, we can get a greater sense of control over the population by limiting their choices.
Sure, you demonize your opponent. And this is exactly what the Bolsheviks did after they took over Russia. This is.
Well, see, but that's non-human.
I've said this earlier. I've seen this movie already. I know where this movie ends up.
Yeah.
It ends up in totalitarian control of everything in a person's life, in the subject's life. And you then are terminated if you no longer have value to the society.
And we don't want to say, because I'm being a Luddite over here, we don't want to say, no to all technology. That's not the point. It's use your moral forces to understand what is evil and what is good about anything, whether it be computer or Facebook or Twitter or the Internet of Things or your car or whatever. If you have a spirit of thankfulness for these things that you don't even understand, because most of us don't understand except Michael McKibben here,
Hardly.
how these machines even work. We don't even know what electricity is. We don't know what electromagnetism is. We know how they work, but we don't know what they are. So what we need is consciousness. And if we can bring our own warmth, our own light, our own morality to these devices, then we can say, oh, Facebook is bad, I'm not going to use it. Matter of fact, I may boycott it. I need the computer because I need to contact my friend who's in Russia or in Czechoslovakia or whatever. What a brilliant, brilliant device it is. But when it comes down to, are you going to turn your human warmth, light, and morality to the machine or to a human? I hope every time your choice is to the human.
But to return
Amen.
to John Stuart Mill in the 19th century, his whole concept was that liberty justified the freedom of the individual in opposition to unlimited state and social control. See, so he was the one who was able to formalize that which was inherent within the U.S. Constitution, Bill of Rights, and all that. Most people have never heard of some of these things, but you have the Federalist Papers.
Right.
Many people have heard of that, but they haven't heard of the Anti-Federalist Papers. Okay, and the crafting of our current form of government is a dialogue between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and you can go back and you can see the issues that they were arguing, and that's the context out of which, as a ferment almost, our constitutional government arose. What's so miraculous about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence that makes me consider them basically divinely inspired is because if you go back to the arguments that they were having, they're not applicable necessarily to the arguments we have today. But the constitutional framework is sufficient to meet those challenges.
I heard a very simple, and I think this came from the framers, a very simple definition of property. It's I use my freedom, I use my creativity and my freedom to create something out of my mind. And as soon as I do that, that's my property, not the state's. And that seems to have been a guiding principle for them on the issue of property. And it's interesting that Benjamin Franklin talked about having banks base their value on property and not all these made up expressions. And that seems to work. That if you use your freedom to create something, whatever it is, and give it life, then that's your property.
And look at all the things he invented, from his kite experiments, catching lightning, putting it in a Leyden jar, basically the first electrical experiments, his experiments in so many, in the Gulf Stream, and all the things that he invented. But also he was a creator in being a printer. And
Right.
if we can remember that in those days, what we would call, in our day, the internet was printing.
That's right.
And simply some of the pamphlets that he printed, one could literally point back to the pamphlets of Thomas Paine or the pamphlets of Benjamin Franklin and say, these communications went out and changed our world. So what we need to do with what we're doing here today in this conversation, or in our intelligence reports, or in the work that you and your friends and the shareholders contribute to the Americans for Innovation, which make sure to go look at that site, folks, because you're going to see everything you need there if you want to look up anybody and find out their crimes, literally their indictable crimes. And what we need to do is we need to bring this stuff to light so that we can see it for what it is. And then you can make up your mind. We're in America. We do have freedom, and people will choose to go to evil consciously in some cases. But those people who are good people need to understand what these are so that they can put these things in perspective in their life, because the future is not going to be ran by an artificial intelligent God. That's not going to happen. So throw that away. The concept is going to be that in the future, machines will only be ran by people who are moral, the good machines. There will be bad machines, and they will be ran by the continuous amorality or immorality that we see in our machines now. But in the future, as John has pointed out, machines will only be able to be ran, the good ones, by people who have moral character. And that is what will pass into the machine. And then the machine at that point will be able to give us something that is also a gift to our own human evolution.
Yeah, that serves rather than enslaves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and so you have to say, okay, well, but what can we do right now? And I think that President Trump is hitting on something very important when he talks about draining the swamp. He sees, and he has shown through the way he has acted in regarding to climate control and regarding to the UN and regarding to all these great New World Order agendas, that the big problem that mankind is suffering under right now is centralization. And that there has to be a decentralization of powers from Washington. The states have to reassert themselves.
Yes.
Now, part of the problem that has happened is back in 1871, there was a major event when
Wait, let me check my calendar.
we're got another time travel.
yeah, we got to do a time travel. But you have to see these things.
No, you're
don't.
right. 1871 is the crucial year.
1871,
The
what
Republican came. The Republic basically has been under attack since.
It's been hijacked since because.
So that was after the Civil War.
Well, see, what you have to keep in mind is that.
It was the founding of Washington, D.C. in 1871.
Well,
it started causing the severe problems.
But that's there's so much more to it.
I
Because,
understand. That's the long and short.
Okay, you have the Revolutionary War, right? And you have 1776, the founding of these United States, okay? It's not the United States. It's not a
Right.
thing, okay? It's these United States. These were separate sovereign states that were working together. Now, when they defeated the crown, okay, each one of these states had a different contract that it was served under. And these were beholding to corporate entities in Britain. Okay? Now, the problem was that when we separated off as these United States from being colonies, the debt was not resolved. Okay? And so what happened to that debt? And who did we owe that debt to? See, that was part of the issue. And that ties into the whole debacle that eventually culminated in the Federal Reserve, you see, because
So that was just a broiling, unresolved issue.
it was an unresolved issue, which some things were set aside by Thomas Jefferson because he just resigned them to the dustbin of what you would call they have a specific legal term for it, odious debt. Okay, and it's a debt that's created through evil means is an odious debt, and therefore it's not necessary to repay. There was a lot of great things that came from Thomas Jefferson. Really the formal creation of the Marines, and the Marines are singular in that regard, and that's what's so interesting. What's going on right now in the current presidency and the prominent role of the Navy and the Marines in what President Trump is trying to accomplish, because like the Marine Band is called the President's Own, okay, and the Marines are the branch of the military that the President, all on his own, can call them to action. Okay, separate from all the other branches of the military. People don't know that about the Marines. There's a special dispensation there. And so that's interesting in light of the fact that he's now surrounded largely by Marine personnel, and that's who's really protecting him, I believe, as to certain other people in the know. And that's even been pointed out by Q Clearance. See, so what's going on right now is a counter coup against the coup that was brought into being through the actions of George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama, that whole cartel. And the positive indication of it is the bombing of the opium factories that just happened just a week or so ago.
Well, you don't read anything
in
about
Afghanistan. No, you find this. I just happened to find this article that described it, and they blew. That's been really a source for revenue for what we might call the underbelly. So there's all these sources of revenue that are there, and for some reason this evil cartel thinks it deserves and needs unlimited funding. And so, for example, through the efforts of...
Well, when you can't create things, that's the only way to get it.
Well, yeah. But Catherine Austin Fitts, working with a professor over at Michigan State University, has been able so far to come up with $21 to $26 trillion of money that's disappeared missing since 1998. Wow. So, and that money can be clawed back. So that would give what a good. We could just give everybody.
That would cover the Miller Act notice.
Yeah. See, so it's not like the resources aren't there. It's just that this whole gambit of centralization has absconded with our birthright.
And that's because people believe that computers are correct, they're our future, and that artificial intelligence is greater than human intelligence. But that is a complete myth, and I can say that since 1913 and the founding of the Federal Reserve and the dozen other acts that happened to attempt to destroy our republic and destroy the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, as John has so clearly addressed, those things have been turned around since Trump got elected. And so what we see with what you're doing, Michael, bringing the win-win-win scenario of the Miller Act and getting President Trump involved in basically stopping the blind decision to let centralization, computerization, globalization take over this country and basically supplant the U.S. Constitution. So I just want to again thank you for you coming up here and having these conversations with us, and John for you joining us today. And all I can say is I hope that we continue these conversations, because every time I speak with you, Michael, I learn so much. It's just remarkable. And we just want to salute you and your 17 years of striving to defeat these bureaucratic, static quo, deep state, dark lords, really, is what it is. And we want to see your vision that you initially came up with of what social networking was supposed to do to free people, so that they will no longer just be bound by machines, but that we can put the human first. So thank you, Michael. We sure appreciate your conversations. And John, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.